This is Nats, arguably one of the best Sentinel players in Valorant history. In this SkillCapped video, we're going to be explaining every move that Nats makes that every Sentinel player needs to understand. These examples will be coming from a ranked match on his world-class Killjoy on the map Haven. First, let's start off with the defensive side. A core topic that Nats perfectly encapsulates with how he plays is his understanding of the relationship between the lurker versus the anchor. For those who haven't heard of these terms or are looking for a quick refresher here, the anchor, who is usually a sentinel, is the defender tasked with the mission of solo holding a site and is the last one to rotate if the other site is attacked. The lurker, who commonly falls under the agent role of a controller, sentinel, or occasionally a duelist, is a person whose main goal is to make the job of being an anchor as hard as possible. This is done by either applying pressure to a site so they can keep the anchor and other defenders preoccupied while their team applies pressure elsewhere, or to punish the anchor's rotations by either telling their team to come to their bomb site or to push to find a killer flank. The reason why we chose to outline the relationship between these two players is that commonly these people are often clashing with one another throughout the entirety of the game. And to explain this further, let's take a look at the very first round of this match. About 15 seconds into the pistol round, Nat's team communicates that it's a rush onto A site, which prompts him to immediately rotate through spawn. After the initial chaos, it settles into a 2v2 situation here. But before grouping up with the Sage, Nat's teammates communicate that the Killjoy hasn't been spotted and that she may be lurking. Now, as we mentioned earlier, lurkers are generally sentinel or controller agents. So this combination of understanding sentinel agents are incentivized to lurk, plus the info that the enemy Killjoy hasn't been seen yet, gives Nats an educated guess that she could be looking for some kind of lurk play. And his intuition couldn't have been more perfect here, because after sitting at A-Link holding B site, he cleanly one-taps the Killjoy who was looking to flank. As the anchor, these types of situations will come up quite often because you're usually the last to rotate, making you the main target of lurkers since your rotation pathing is much more obvious to capitalize on, as well as giving the lurker much more time to get into positions that you or your team may not be expecting. Here's another case of Nats watching out for this exact same lurk as he rotates through B site in a different match. But the anchor isn't the only one that has to watch out for sneaky lurk plays here. As the anchor, you must be willing to break the common thought process that many sentinels have to stay within the defender's side of the map. Much like their lurking counterparts, anchor players have the freedom to make calculated but sneaky push plays into enemy territory. In round 6, Nats creates a plan during the pregame where he places his turret on the right side of the B site entrance while having his teammate hold for any peeks from mid window. And while this is all happening, he walks down mid, hugging the left wall and focusing his crosshair on grass. By taking this calculated risk, Nats is able to put himself in a position where he's able to easily find a frag if the attackers choose to fall back out of a lobby, or at the very least, can listen to their footsteps to get a better understanding of their positioning. Now, unfortunately, the alarm bot spots him, but to retaliate, Nats places his KJ ult into window, giving him a huge power play to keep all the attackers cramped into A long as the rest of his team pinch them from A site. These types of plays, they're impossible to replicate if you aren't willing to flank or lurk on defense as a sentinel. Finding the perfect balance between standard defensive play and educated risk-taking is a must-know skill all sentinels must understand. And for everything else you need to climb the ranks and improve fast, there's SkillCapped.com. We take the highest priority skills to climb ranks fast, such as things like aiming, and we break that down into a step-by-step course that's really easy to understand. You'll not only learn the basics, such as crosshair placement, clearing angles, things like that, but also more advanced concepts like getting more multi-kills and repositioning. That's not all though, as every week we release 6 brand new VOD reviews where Radiant coaches teach you how to climb out of the exact rank that you're stuck in. And if you're looking for something just a little bit more personal instead, then we got you covered there too with our new one-on-one coaching at our SkillCapped Discord. All this seems too good to be true, right? Well, don't worry, because we're backed up by a rank up guarantee. If you don't significantly improve while actively using SkillCapped, then you get your money back, and there's no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below and get the rank that you've always wanted. All right, now let's get back into today's guide. Now, another balance that Sentinel players must navigate is with how they use their defensive setups, specifically the difference between default setups and variation setups. As the name implies, a default setup is going to be your most commonly used setup when you're playing, but many players will make a huge error when it comes to their default setups. To outline what we're hinting at here, let's take a look at the buy phase of round 3.
Да нормально. Приехал в неделю.
Сколько осталось? Неделя?
Да чё?
Вы же сразу в плей-оффе, ё-моё, у вас еще дохуя.
This round, Nats full buys, having all of his abilities at his disposal. Nats first starts off by placing his alarm bot on the entrance of B site, then makes his way over to Garage, where he places his turret in the Garage hallway, then tosses a molly towards C long and hops up into Garage window. Now, we're going to pause here, and I want you to take a moment to think of an answer to this question. What makes this his default setup here? The key point here is that his default setup fulfills two important roles. First, his setup is maximizing the amount of lanes that he has influence over. The second is that he has a plan on how to play off of his utility. Now, to go over to the first topic, we'll take a moment to briefly explain what we mean by lanes. If we were to take a look at a full overview of the map, we can see that there are certain pathways the attackers can use in order to progress into the defender's side of the map. For Haven, we can see that there are 5 main lanes that attackers can take: C long, Garage, mid, A short, and A long. So as the defenders, it's our job to try to protect these 5 lanes if possible. To bring this back to the topic at hand, though, we can see that Nat's default setup has influence over 3 of the lanes on the map: his alarm bot for B site, his molly for C long, and his turret plus himself for Garage. We, as the defenders, generally don't know which site the attackers will go to, so making sure we have soft coverage of as many lanes as possible puts us in a good position to have an impact no matter where they choose to go. Okay, so the second rule is that he has a plan on how to play off of his utility. This one's a little bit more self-explanatory if we let the round play out here, so we're going to do that.
That's done. Placing swarm grenade. Swarm grenade out. One enemy remaining. Spike down. C.
Зайчик ласт? Nice.
Nats sits window and pays attention to the sound cues the enemy team is giving him. His turret spots an enemy peeking into Garage doors. When this occurs, Nats peeks towards double doors where his turret just made contact. Sadly, the enemy had retreated back to cover by the time Nats had peeked. However, Nats uses this chance to reposition himself to the left side of Garage window. After a few seconds, another attacker peeks into Garage and triggers the turret. Nats goes for the exact same play as before and peeks after the turret has been killed, finding himself an easy frag onto the unsuspecting Omen. After some whiffed shots and a bit of unpeeking, he tosses a molly into Garage and peeks with his jet to clear out the remaining attackers. And as you can clearly see here, the combination of the turret as well as Nat's positioning from the pregame phase was all a well-established plan to recreate this play where Nats can play off his utility to give himself an easier gunfight against anyone who dared to step into Garage. Much like the role itself, your default setup must have a solid plan beforehand on how you're going to use it. But much like life, we can't just do the same thing every single round. That'd be insanity. We must be able to display that we have multiple different variations to keep ourselves unpredictable. Variation can mean either completely changing your setup entirely based on potential reads on what you think the enemy may do, or it can just be slight modifications to default setups you've already displayed. Okay, so to show something closer to the latter point here, let's hop into round 9. During the pregame phase, Nats goes through the motions of placing his Killjoy setup, but makes a slight change to where he places his turret in Garage, opting to place it on the steps leading into Garage window. Even though this turret is still placed to hold Garage, the important detail here is the angle at which it faces the double doors. If we take a look, we can see that his turret has a line of sight to grass through the crack of the double doors. To the untrained eye, this may seem like a minute detail, but Nats has already devised a plan on how to use this turret to its fullest. Nats positions himself right next to the garage entrance in preparation for whenever the turret makes contact with an enemy outside. As soon as the turret rings, Nats swings out of garage and picks off Omen while he's busy shooting at his turret. This Omen was conditioned to think that the turret in garage would be placed much deeper than it was, but as he was caught off guard, that's when Nats chose to strike. Small changes like these can lead to huge advantages during a single game, but maybe small changes to your default setup may not be enough to win a round. Fully changing your entire utility setup may be what's needed in order to completely counter what the attackers will do. Sometimes, taking into account what resources the enemies have or what tendencies they've shown can help in giving you an idea of how you'll want to prepare your setup for the upcoming round. In this Cypher game, Nats takes notice that the enemies have 4, almost 5 ultimates ready for this next round, especially Killjoy's ult. So he communicates a plan to his team that he wants to play a retake setup towards A site, since a very common play with Killjoy's ultimate is to plant it short A. As he's finished setting up his utility, he makes his way to A heaven and the round begins.
Start A.
Pushing behind. Jet up drift.
Yeah. Okay, go behind when they gonna put ulti, okay? Don't go now.
Yeah.
Let them cook a
Wait,
bit.
wait,
No,
wait,
Astra.
wait, wait.
Fuck that turret.
You should run.
I'll nade that. I'll nade
It's
it.
battle. You can nade it from here.
I did.
Cage triggered.
Okay,
Go
well,
long, go long.
nice.
One enemy
Yeah.
remaining.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going long short.
Last one.
As Nats expected, the attackers commit to an A-side execute with the Killjoy ult. The combination of his positioning heaven and the trips give him some pretty easy kills as the attackers rush into an empty A-side while they also get flanked by 3 of Nats' teammates. The result is the attackers are swiftly dealt with in an almost flawless victory. Even though Sentinels are seen as a very static position, knowing when to be dynamic with your setup is a crucial skill Sentinel players have to know. Anyways, enough talk of the defense side, let's move on to the attacking side. As we mentioned earlier in the video, Sentinels on the attacking side quite commonly fill the role of the lurker on the attacking side. And as the lurker, one of your main goals is to ensure that you are the positional insurance of the team. Now, what we mean by that is wherever your teammates choose to put their effort towards, your job is to maintain coverage over the other lanes of the map. This act of ensuring that you have information of what's going on in these separate lanes allows your team to have positional insurance in the sense that if your team is hard stopped at the site they attempted to take or just decide to rotate to another site, your team has the ease of mind knowing that when they do return, there's no potential threat that the defenders may have pushed onto the attacker side of the map. Without this confidence, usually teams either A, are ignorant to these potential threats and are punished by some defender hiding in a sneaky spot, or B, are scared of these possibilities and are forced to spend time and resources to methodically re-clear all of these dangerous angles that were once safe. Let's see this concept in action by hopping into round 18.
Wait,
Peace
pause.
now.
I guess.
If you round in stream snipers.
Turn out.
Okay, we need to revive. That's our smokes.
Wait, I'm gonna jump.
Drop the spike.
Anyway,
Turret
careful
down.
right
Double.
long.
Nats begins the round by placing a pretty simple turret on the top of the box in grass. A side note here about this is that even though this may look like quite a simple turret, even Nats uses a lineup from the barrier in order to place this turret to make sure that he can place the turret as quickly as possible. This is because, as we saw earlier, a common play defenders make is to walk down mid while looking for a duel towards grass. This turret is able to gain info on whether or not the enemies are going for this exact play, as well as catching if anyone swings out of garage doors. Now, after a few moments, his Omen dies, and they group up to usher the Sage towards his corpse for a res. This is when a defender peeks out of the garage doors and kills Nat's turret. Now, even though this was a good play from the enemies to destroy the turret, so they can also deny that positional information, it's still an overall net positive for Nat's team because now they have a mental framework for when the enemies may push up. Or, at the very least, know they need to re-clear their side of the map if they return there later on. Soft information is still better than no information. You, as the Sentinel, may not have the strongest toolkit for creating aggressive opportunities to win over the round, but your strength lies within minimizing the number of positional weaknesses your team may have. However, even though your kit isn't specifically made for taking space, there are still some neat tricks you can use as a Sentinel to achieve this. With some of your utility, you're actually able to use it to clear certain angles for your team to fill in an almost pseudo-initiator role if needed. Now, specifically with your tripwire-like abilities, as you'll be seeing this in the 16th round. Nats and his team will go for a pretty standard A-site execute, and after dodging some utility and establishing lobby and long control, Nats makes his way over to short. He then places his alarm bot right in the dead center of the short entrance. Once this cheeky alarm bot is armed, it'll successfully clear both the close right and left corners, which can be quite annoying if they're left unchecked. Once he's finished his firefight, he recalls the alarm bot immediately since it's already finished its task of clearing the close corner angles. Now, what's amazing about this trick is that every Sentinel with a tripwire-like ability can use it to varying degrees. Here's how a Cypher could use his trip in a similar fashion. And here's a clip of Valorant ex-coach and analyst Sean Garris explaining how Furia uses this same concept with Chamber and why we may be seeing this ability being used like this more often in the future.
How people were playing Chamber on this patch. So he's clearing out all of ramps with this trip. And he is the only player I think that I've seen do this on Chamber. It's very unique. And I think it's going to make this playstyle very possible. So again, he's going to go through mid here. He just put his trip inside ropes right here, right in front of the Viper. Now, I'm going to rewind it so that you can see it one more time. But I want you to pay attention to how long it takes this trip to activate on the Viper when he places it. So the bird gets info inside of the vents. So you see right there, he's putting it down. You can see it on the map. 1, 2, 3, 4. It just activates right now. Like, that's insane. That is an insane activation time. Here's another one. So DG's going up through mid. There's trips right there. This trip doesn't even go off. Watch this again. Like, it doesn't even get to go off. It's kind of funny. That was when I was first made aware of this trap arm speed and how big of a problem it was. I understand why it was high because, you know, Chamber's a Sentinel. But how it was used in those rounds, I almost feel like that type of player should be rewarded. Like, that is very creative. You have to have a lot of game sense to do stuff like that. And if you collect it, there's a very long wait time. So I actually love this change. Definitely you're going to see him play in ranked after these changes. But you're even going to see him picked more in pro play.
This was just a glimpse of what we have to offer, though, over at SkillCapped.com, where we've got you covered with dozens of tailor-made courses that will teach you everything you need to know about climbing in Valorant. We'll teach you everything you need to know about mastering your mechanics so that you can start playing at an immortal level in no time. Along with this, we also upload tons of VOD reviews each week that our coaches record from looking at players just like you. So rather than just paying for one $200 coaching session from one of those other guys, you can get access to hundreds of sessions for just a few bucks. Not only that, but our coaches are also at the ready in our Discord to take a look at your gameplay and tell you exactly what your issues are, if by chance you don't find value from all the other things we have to offer on the site. So use the link below for a discount link in your purchase today, and other than that, we here at SkillCapped want to thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.